Call the meeting to order. First off, I'm going to ask if there are any subs on the government side, which I know they're not. Opposition, any subs this morning? Nope. Sounds good. So appearing before us today, we have the Atlantic Lottery Corporation, and we have Mr. Daigle. And I'd like to know if you'd like to introduce your staff, and if you have a short presentation, then we can get underway.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Standing Committee on Public Accounts today. My name is Patrick Daigle, and I'm the President and CEO of Atlantic Lottery. And I have two colleagues joining me today that I would like to introduce. Suzanne Young, to my right, is our Chief Financial Officer, and Stephanie Ryan is our Director of Corporate Social Responsibility and Talent Management. This past fiscal year that ended for us on March 31st, 2022, was a real success story for Atlantic Lottery. We owe this success to our dedicated employees. Our employees live and they work right here in New Brunswick and all across Atlantic Canada. They've continued to show up and deliver results for our players, our retailers, and our shareholders in a socially responsible manner. And that's the most important thing for us. Our success as a company, it does more than benefit us. It benefits all Atlantic Canadians because 100% of our proceeds and our profit is returned to the 4 Atlantic provinces, and that money goes to support the essential services and programs that we all use. Atlantic Lottery is proud to contribute to the prosperity of New Brunswick communities. As of our last fiscal year, Atlantic Lottery operations contributed to over 2,600 jobs and almost $360 million in GDP to the economy of New Brunswick, and that's in the form of direct, indirect, and induced economic impacts. As a matter of fact, there's a statistic we're very proud of, and it is that 92 cents of every dollar that's generated stays right here in our region. Everything we do at Atlantic Lottery is driven by our purpose, and our purpose is to delight our players and to make a meaningful contribution to all Atlantic Canadians. Our vision is to be a world-leading, responsible, digital gaming experience company that is driven by that higher purpose to give back. Other than our annual profit return, we are always working on innovative ways to achieve that purpose. And this includes partnerships with many community organizations across New Brunswick, through fundraising support and event sponsorship under our Atlantic Lottery Community Proud program. We also strive to support and celebrate everything that makes Atlantic Canada a special place to live. Each year, Atlantic Lottery proudly sponsors community events that have important cultural, social, and economic impacts across the region. And in New Brunswick this past year, we have invested over $200,000 in sponsorships across New Brunswick, and that includes 20 festival sponsorships. Atlantic Lottery has worked hard to stay connected with our communities during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are always evolving to provide world-class games and experiences for our players. And we do that with healthy play front of mind. We will continue to improve our online presence in the coming months to give players access to exciting new offerings through safe and secure platforms. And as always, we aim to delight our players with games that they can enjoy responsibly as entertainment in all settings. So in addition to our online games, we continue to explore new ways to enhance our retail and venue space as well to ensure our customers have the quality, entertaining experiences that they expect. Atlantic Lottery continues to be committed to the promotion of healthy play. Healthy play underpins the value proposition behind our products, and it's an essential part of our overall long-term strategy. It's core to what we do. So we provide players with information to help them understand the games they play. We provide them with tools to track and manage their activity, and resources to assist in identifying and addressing problematic habits. We are proud to have launched a new ALC.ca healthy play policy in 2022 in order to improve upon Atlantic Lottery's standard of care towards its players. All players need to accept this new policy prior to playing Atlantic Lottery products on our online platform, ALC.ca. Atlantic Lottery recently received Level 4 recertification from the World Lottery Association for its responsible gambling activities, the highest level that is available in the world. And this shows that we offer some of the best programs and practices in the world, and that we continue to enhance our commitment to healthy play within the organization. And on the topic of online platforms, unfortunately, we have seen an increase in illegal online gambling operations across Canada. Atlantic Lottery is the only 100% legal and government-regulated provider of commercial online gaming and sports betting products in Atlantic Canada. New Brunswickers are playing on and seeing advertising from other unregulated gambling sites without realizing that they cannot legally play on these sites under Canadian and provincial law. These illegal operators are not regulated by the provinces of Atlantic Canada, and as such, they receive no government oversight. And while 100% of Atlantic Lottery's profits stay in Atlantic Canada and contribute to our communities, that is not the case with illegal online gambling operators. We estimate that approximately $30 million left New Brunswick last year to the benefit of these illegal gambling activities and websites. And that number is projected to continue growing steadily in years to come as these illegal operators become more aggressive to pursue the Canadian market. As Atlantic Lottery continues to evolve to meet the changing landscape of gaming, we remain committed to doing so in a transparent manner that acts in the best interests of players and our provincial shareholders. After all, integrity and responsibility are and have always been core values of our company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daigle. So what we do is we work on 15-minute rotations of questions. We'll start off with the official opposition, then move to the government, and then the third party. So on the opposition side, okay. Mr. Lagacé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Daigle, and your staff for being here. Good Friday morning, no storm. We're all happy with that. I'm going to have a few questions. Some of them might seem a little bit basic because I'll be truthful with you. I tried to go on ALC, and my computer won't allow me because I guess I'm a government employee, so I don't have access to your reports or on the website. So I guess I'll have to buy my 649 ticket some other way, probably right at the store. First question, you mentioned just in your allocation that the illegal operators cost $30 million. That's just for New Brunswick, right? That's estimated?
That's right. That's an estimate, and we believe that in the vicinity of $140 million is leaving the Atlantic Canadian region.
And what's been the growth curve of that? Because how many years have we been sort of really being impacted by this?
Yeah, so this is activity that, frankly, has been taking place for a long period of time, unregulated and unchecked, and it has been growing significantly. We saw a material upspike in the 2020 and 2021 years as single-event sports betting became legal in Canada, so that was one of the changes that was brought about in the Criminal Code of Canada for gaming. And we also saw a material upspike in coming out of the Ontario market, because the province of Ontario changed their gaming model whereby they license operators to participate in online gaming inside their province. So those two activities, combined with the pandemic and the fact that there were public health restrictions, keeping people inside their homes. And so I think the combination of those three factors have seen a proliferation of advertising. Very difficult to watch a hockey game without seeing all of these advertisements.
Yes.
And so we've seen we've seen that activity, and in fact, that is the very reason why the province of New Brunswick and Atlantic Lottery launched an iCasino suite of products in August of 2020. The reason we launched that product suite was to try to repatriate players from, we estimate it's 2,000 illegal sites currently available to New Brunswickers today. And we are going to measure that. Once we have more data, we're going to be measuring that. Our early research shows that 60% of players have reduced their play with offshore sites since we've been in the market, and that's a statistic we're proud of, but we are going to track that progress. So to go back to your question, we absolutely have seen growth in the area, and we are absolutely concerned about it because these operators, as I said, do not provide the same healthy play tools that Atlantic Lottery does, and the activity is untaxed, it's unregulated, and the money all leaves our region.
But to the, and I don't, not specific numbers, but just the scope of that spike, are we seeing doubling every year? Are we seeing a certain percentage? I guess I'm just, if there's been a trend and it's going to continue, what can we imagine that $30 million being next year and in 5 years is kind of what I'm alluding to.
So I can tell you it's very difficult to predict where that business is going to go because it is illegal. It's been very difficult for us to get these estimates. And how we've done that, we've used, in fact, the preeminent gambling research organization that is out of the UK. They provide this market-based analysis for a number of jurisdictions. A lot of these organizations are publicly traded companies in foreign countries, and so there is information that is available. They do their own primary research, and so they triangulate this analysis into what they believe to be an estimate, because at the end of the day, it is illegal activity. It's not reported. And so in terms of a projection, it's difficult for me to put a number on that, but we do have every belief that given the amount of advertising that is taking place in our market, and given the activity that we're seeing over the past couple of years, we do believe it is going to continue to grow.
Okay. Obviously, the discussion around gaming has always been there's revenues, significant revenues coming into the provinces, but we also supply programs for problem gamblers and help. On that side, I don't know if you get stats or if they report, but have you seen, because there seems to be a foreign entity that's entered the market that we may not be getting revenues, but we may be getting the consequences. Have you seen a significant spike on that aspect because of easy access to all these illegal sites?
So thank you for the question, because this is a very, very important topic for us to discuss. And the Criminal Code of Canada is crystal clear. In fact, it couldn't be subject to interpretation. What it says is that commercial gambling in Canada is illegal unless it's managed and conducted by provincial governments or their agents. And so regulated lotteries, like Atlantic Lottery, are transparent and accountable. I can tell you that there is not one of these 2,000 illegal operators that would be sitting in front of the committee today answering questions in a transparent manner. So we have anti-money laundering controls, we verify age of majority and residency, and as I said, for the record, Atlantic Lottery is the only legal digital gaming operator in our region. So these other entities, they just don't place the same priority on player health and responsible gambling as Atlantic Lottery does, nor do they return profit. And so at the end of the day, this activity is illegal, it's unregulated, it's untaxed, there are no jobs generated from it, and no positive impact on the economy. The money is just being drained out of the region, and we just can't guarantee the safety of those sites, because as I said, they're not regulated. And so the main differentiator is that these illegal offshore operators are driven purely by a profit motive. And it's just a completely different way of looking at the business from the way Atlantic Lottery looks at the business. So we look at it from a safe and responsible perspective first and foremost. And as I said, integrity and responsibility have been core values. So we have a very robust and fulsome responsible gambling tool set to provide to our players. To answer your question about whether we've seen any increase in problem gambling, I have not seen any evidence that there is an increase in problem gambling as a result of the increased gambling activity and the proliferation. The statistics seem to be relatively consistent year over year in that regard.
You mentioned in your introductory speech that you've introduced iCasino. Seems like maybe a strategy to say, build back better. We'll create a more interesting site to get people to come to that site, which is regulated, versus the illegal sites. Is there any other strategies? Because obviously, we also talked about heavy advertising from some of these sites. Is ALC planning to do any kind of counter moves towards communication, informing the public about the impacts? Is there any of that going on?
So the way I've always looked at this problem is, I can give you an analogy of a football team that has, I guess, three parts to a football team. They have an offense, they have a defense, and they have special teams. The offense component of this is to make sure that we are in the market with a competitive offering, because we can offer a healthy alternative to players. The defensive component of this is a coalition that we formed with other regulated lotteries across Canada. So the lotteries of British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Quebec, and all 4 Atlantic Canadian provinces are involved in this coalition. So the reason we've joined forces is to raise awareness of this very important issue to key stakeholders. And those stakeholders are federal regulators, they're provincial decision makers, they're broadcasters, they're even players, sports teams, sports leagues. Our research tells us that 80% of Atlantic Canadians believe that this activity is legal because of their advertising. And so we have joined forces. We have hired a full-time executive director who is developing a communications plan, a very fulsome plan to try to defend our licenses inside of Atlantic Canada, raise awareness, perhaps change some legislation. There are opportunities to change legislation to eradicate this activity.
To that point, is there any gaming legislation at the provincial level that you think is necessary, or anything that will be introduced soon?
So the Gaming Control Act in New Brunswick is fairly clear, and as I said, the criminal code is very clear. There are tactics and strategies that can be done. We are right now in the process of meeting with provincial representatives, not only in Atlantic Canada, but across the country in looking at alternatives. And they range from advertising bans, trying to block IP addresses. So there are some tactics that we can deploy legislatively that we are examining right now, yes.
Is there any significant differences in the gaming legislation between stakeholder governments? Are we all pretty much in line, or is that an issue?
Yeah, that's not an issue as it relates to this particular challenge. Certainly every province has unique gaming legislation, unique regulations, you know, and they run their gaming, you know, businesses, if you will, slightly different. But as it relates to this issue, there really is no material differences from province to province.
Okay. At one time, there was concerns that lotto ticket sales outlet staff were winning disproportionately to other players. Are you continuing to monitor this unusual activity, and is there still winning patterns that you see, or has policies changed to address the concerns? Has there been anything introduced, I guess?
So this is an issue that arose in the entire industry maybe 13 years ago. I can't exactly recall when it was, but certainly at that time a whole series of robust controls were put in place in the retail environment, probably the most important of which is encouraging players to sign their ticket. And that is a communication campaign that we have ongoing. So we're continuing to train retailers, we're continuing to educate players on the role that they can play in creating a robust control environment. We have player-facing screens, we provide receipts to players when they come in. So we have a very significant control environment. We do monitor that control environment. We do testing of our controls with our retailers on a regular basis. And we also analyze the data. And what the data tells us is that related party wins, you know, are no different than any other form of win. They are random, they do change. And I do have some numbers to demonstrate that. Major related party wins in 2022, and by a related party, what I mean by that is a retailer who sells our products or an employee of Atlantic Lottery, right? So someone who is not completely at arm's length with the business. So our major related party wins in 2022, we had 16 of them. In 2021, we had 12 of them. So it was 3.6% versus 2.6%. And what I can tell you is that the number of related party wins greater than $1,000 has been consistent year over year at 2%. And so this is a case of, more randomness than anything else. And the numbers just are not fluctuating. So we are comfortable that the controls that we have in place are working effectively.
Okay, thank you. Earlier this month, the New Brunswick Court of Appeal ruled in favor of Madawaska-Maliseet First Nation against New Brunswick Lotteries and Gaming Corporation in a dispute over profit sharing on video terminals, gaming devices. Was ALC asked to provide any advice to NBLGC on this case, or were you involved at all in the proceedings?
So the way First Nations gaming works in relation to Atlantic Lottery is essentially in the video lottery program and in a ticket lottery program. I guess we have some First Nation retailers there, but basically we treat our First Nations site holders exactly the same way as we treat our other commercial operators throughout the province and site holders. In other words, we pay them a commission, we supply the video lottery terminals and the machines, and we work with them on their account to make sure that they're properly trained in social responsibility and that we have the right control environment. We have site standards that we monitor, things like that. And so with regards to the tax treaty and any other sort of relationship that takes place beyond Atlantic Lotteries involved in operating the program within the regulations and the legislation really is a contract and a relationship between the province and the First Nations. It really isn't something that Atlantic Lottery has a mandate to be involved with, and so we're not involved in that.
I'm on that one. I've got 10 seconds left. That's good. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lagasse. Ms. Bacchus?
Vice Chair. Good morning, Mr. Daigle, again, and I wanted to thank you and your staff for appearing before committee today. Can you expand a little bit more on the Community Proud campaign that you mentioned in your opening remarks? I understand it's for local nonprofits, festivals in different communities, and I think I took some notes. You have spent $200,000 on 20 festival sponsorships. Well, I just wanted you to know that we have in my riding of St. Croix, McAdam Family Festival, just to name a few, the Campobello Fog Fest and Sea Glass Festival, Chocolate Fest in St. Stephen, and the Winter Warmer Festival in St. Andrews. How, if those festivals wanted to apply for funding, would they go about it? And there are different qualifiers, I imagine.
Thank you for the question, and the reason I thank you is because this is a very, very important part of who we are as a company. We live here in Atlantic Canada, we live here in New Brunswick, and we love to support the communities. In fact, one of the pleasures of my job is meeting every new employee that we hire, and one of the questions I ask them when they come to our organization is why did they choose us as a career? And almost every single time they talk about the community involvement that our organization has, the spirit of giving back to community. And so our sponsorship, as I said, we are in the vicinity of $200,000 in New Brunswick, over 20 festivals. I can give you some examples of festivals that you would recognize. This last year was the ECMAs, the Harvest Music Festival, the Sussex Balloon Festival. We had the 30th anniversary of Pays de la Sagouine, and so we are truly all over the province. Now, with regards to how organizations qualify for a sponsorship, we do have a fairly robust application form to go through. It is an objective form, and it's based on alignment with our key business initiatives, which is about community and culture and heritage. It is about equitable representation around the province and across the region, and we do look for signature events for community. We have a sponsorship application form that we use, and it is done through a third party, and so it is very objectively evaluated. My advice is for applicants to engage in that process early, as early as they can. And the reason for that is because on a quarterly basis, we do have to close off the process just for efficiency and administration purposes. And so we absolutely love the program. We know that it's here to stay, and we are excited to continue playing a material role in the communities.
That was going to be one of my questions, if you're going to continue the program. When is the cutoff, like for, say, this year? Has it already passed, or?
Well, as I said, there are quarterly cutoffs, so it's not a case necessarily where the first person who applies that is successful gets all of the funding. So we have our funding allocated throughout the year. One of the things that I think we need to do a better job at is advertising and promoting and communicating this process. We do on social media. We absolutely talk often and as much as we can, because we're so proud about our Community Proud program. But you know, this conversation tells me that we need to do an even better job of getting that message out.
Mm-hmm. And it's just for festivals and community involvement initiatives. It's not for things like, I think we discussed earlier, medical clinics or helping along in that manner.
That's right, yeah. So these are community-based events.
Okay, thank you very much. I think those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Mr. Turner?
Mr. Turner?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Daigle, thank you for being here, and your team as well, of course. Every great organization has a team, right? Just to follow up on what Ms. Baucus was asking, I guess, just triggered some thoughts in my mind. First of all, I'm really proud that you were located in downtown Moncton. I should have opened by saying that, so it's great to have you here. As we know, in Moncton and New Brunswick and the Maritimes, we were successful in getting the World Junior Hockey Championships. This is an opportunity that only came to us in probably May, June, probably just before summer, and we were successful in bidding. So things like that sometimes happen that you don't know a whole year ahead of time. So is there a way, a mechanism that events to sort of pop up during your major events that can be included or looked at, I guess, as a possibility? Is that real?
So one of the things that we pride ourselves as an organization, being owned by 4 crowns, is flexibility. And so absolutely, as opportunities arise in year, we do have some autonomy to reallocate funds, to look at opportunities to be involved at levels, that are community-based and, somewhat unexpected. So yes, we do.
And I am aware that you did play a bit of a role in, I think, the New Year's Eve celebrations, so that's appreciated, of course. You mentioned the figure of approximately $200,000. That's for New Brunswick? Overall, the budget, that's for New Brunswick.
Yes, that's right.
What about the other 3 Atlantic provinces? Do they have a similar budget or a similar program, or is it strictly a New Brunswick program?
I can tell you that the number that we're quoting is a New Brunswick number. The program that we have in place in New Brunswick is the same program throughout Atlantic Canada. I don't have the number at my disposal right now. It is a material number, though, because there are big events throughout the region that we sometimes get involved in that are regional in nature. And so I can give you an example of the Canada Games that are being hosted in Prince Edward Island. So this is a regional event. It most certainly has economic benefit and impact to Prince Edward Island, but it also impacts all of the provinces of Atlantic Canada. Even in New Brunswick, we know that the ski operation for the Canada Games is going to be at Crab Mountain, so there is some benefit conferred on New Brunswick there. So we are involved in that as an example, but we have a very fulsome sponsorship allocation and community proud allocation over the entire region.
You mentioned about the East Coast Music Awards. That's something obviously that goes from province to province to province each annually, and I gather you follow it wherever it goes, but that you're heavily involved on an annual basis because it is a great regional event that really takes in all 4 provinces, much like you're saying with the Canada Games. What about something like the Cavendish Beach Music Festival? You seem to be a major player in that each and every year. Is that something that's above and beyond, like major sponsorships, that's beyond this community level?
So the Cavendish Beach Music Festival would, and yes, we have been involved over a number of years. It would be one of the signature events in the province of Prince Edward Island. What's interesting about that event, in the past, we've branded it with Lotto Max. We've used it as a product branding mechanism to reach audiences that we may not always reach in terms of their demographic with our products. One of the I'll say one of the industry challenges, to be honest with you, is engaging 19 to 35-year-old individuals in a lottery game, in making lottery relevant to them. So the Cavendish Beach Music Festival was an opportunity for us to try and reach that demographic, and also to broadcast our healthy play strategy and the tools that we offer. So we have a kiosk there to do that. And so we have been involved in Cavendish for a number of years, and I believe our intention is to be involved in this upcoming edition as well next summer.
So if I understand correctly, and this moving on from that direction, I guess, you actually vend tickets there? People could actually buy tickets on site for the products that you're promoting at that event?
That's right. We have something called a traveling kiosk that if I were to describe it to you, it would look just like a food truck. And it has a panel that opens up, and we have individuals that are not only selling tickets, lottery tickets to age of majority patrons, but also taking the opportunity to educate on healthy play strategies, responsible gaming, and what we are as a company and who we are and what we expect from our players.
I find that interesting. I didn't really realize you did that. And actually, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about were new and unique ways of vending, I guess. And are you looking at, as the world changes, you've got to change the way you market your products and your company, I guess, to the world. I think I was in a convenience store recently, and I think I saw a vending machine. Does that make sense? That I didn't spend a lot of time dwelling on it. I got to really admit right up front, I'm not a player, and I'm not a great customer for you. But my 93-year-old mother-in-law really is a great customer of yours, so I'm asking on her behalf. No, it's just, she loves your products. But reality is, I did see a vending machine in a convenience or gas station recently, and I just wondered is that a more recent development, and how is that working out?
While that is a recent development here in Atlantic Canada, I can tell you that lottery vending machines have been evident in the fabric of consumer channel, retail channel in the United States for many, many, many years. And in fact, this is a trend of self-service that we are seeing at retail. We all go to retail. We all see what's going on in grocery and in drugstores. There is absolutely a move to self-service. And so we rolled out in New Brunswick 27 what we call self-service terminals, and they are, as you would imagine, they're essentially a vending machine. They look almost like a large smartphone that has a touch screen. What I absolutely love about these vending machines, and what was critical to us before we rolled them out, was to make sure we could do this in a socially responsible manner. And so in order to activate the machine, you have to have a driver's license. And so every single purchase that goes through that machine, we know is an age of majority purchase. The machine itself is in the line of sight of the retail clerk, so it's never a standalone. And that retail clerk has what we call a kill switch. They have a remote control switch that can deactivate the machine if they see minors trying to address and engage the machine. And what I have often said is, I wish that our retail channel had a 100% verification of age, the way our self-service terminals do. Now, make no mistake, this is a trend, but we will always have a deep relationship with our retailers. while I do say that our company has aspirations to be a digital gaming experience company, that is our vision. At the end of the day, we know that consumers enjoy buying lottery in a retail environment, and we will be there with our retail partners. They're a very important part of our business. It's foundational. We are not turning our back on that. In fact, I like to say that our competition, all of those illegal operators I was talking about, they would love to have a physical presence inside the region, and so that is a competitive differentiator for us that we are not going to be moving away from. But the self-service terminals are. And Suzanne, did you have something? Do you have some numbers maybe that you'd like to share?
I also want to talk about some functionality with there's accessibility features on the front of the terminal. So if you're maybe shorter like me, you can actually have the screen panel come to the bottom. You can manage the transaction in your language of French or English, which is absolutely wonderful as a tool. And it allows us as well that we can demonstrate or showcase some of our promotions, including healthy play and education on the front screen of the terminal as well, which is wonderful. Of the 27 that we have launched in the New Brunswick area, there are a few more slated to be launched this year. Proud to say that Loblaws in Trinity Moncton was the first machine to hit the $1,000 a week level of transaction, and we're continuing working with Loblaws because they've had such a successful launch in other locations within the region. But you would also see them in both Walmart, Circle K, Shell, and Superstore, so you're seeing that convenience of them so people can go in, get their ticket, and leave. Year-to-date sales, because it is a bit of a soft launch right now, is about $146,000, where we're getting about $160 per terminal per week. So it's in the infancy stages. We are starting our marketing campaigns on it, so you're going to start to see, some healthy play or maybe even some added digital promos to say what the level of the jackpot is as well on the front of the machines.
Just to carry on this train of thought, I guess, so like a convenience store, they would get a rental fee for that machine being in their location, or would they get a percentage of volume?
It's a percentage of volume, I believe.
And have they given up their sales at the counter, or do they still offer that service?
It would be both. Sometimes customers, maybe if you pay at the pumps, you don't want to wait at the line, you can zip into the store, get your ticket, and then exit the store. So it's just an added convenience for our players.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before I move on to Ms. Minton, I've had a request that I ask Atlantic Lotto to forward to the clerk a breakdown on the sponsorships across Atlantic Canada. So I suspect it's maybe all the sponsorships for the whole region, and that will come to the clerk. So now I'll move on to, Ms. Minton.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you and your team for being here this morning. I would like to start by asking some questions about the Atlantic Province's joint follow-up of recommendations to the Atlantic Lottery Corporation from the Auditor Generals. I guess I will start with so there were some recommendations from the Auditor Generals that were completed. There were some that were not completed and some that there's not an intention of implementing. I'd like to start with 2.2, which recommended shareholder governments should periodically review the unanimous shareholder agreement and corporate bylaws and revise as warranted. And so it had been over a decade since that had been reviewed. And I'm wondering if you can provide a status update on that recommendation, please.
So the Auditor's General Report initially was issued in 2016, and as is common practice for the Auditors General, they produced a follow-up report, as you said. And so 6 years ago, when the original report came out, Atlantic Lottery management adopted all of the recommendations that the Auditors General made on a very timely basis. So there were 25 recommendations. I happen to have the numbers in front of me. 25 recommendations that were made from the Auditors General. 9 were made to the management of the organization, which were all implemented. 7 recommendations were made to the Board of Directors, which were implemented, and 9 recommendations were made to the shareholders of the organization, of which 7 were implemented, as you noted. There is a reason, I believe, that the Auditors General directed their recommendations to 3 distinct groups in our governance framework, and that is because each of those groups do have unique accountabilities, decision-making authority, and different mandates. And so, as it relates to the unanimous shareholders agreement, I can tell you that truly is a shareholder matter. It is not a matter for management of the organization, but I will offer some comments and some observations on it. It is my understanding that the unanimous shareholder agreement that we have has been extensively reviewed by all 4 provinces. It is awaiting a formal protocol approval in 1 or more of the provinces right now. And so it's not the case that the agreement hasn't been reviewed. It is the case that it hasn't been formally signed off, though, and that is the recommendation that the Auditors General made. So of the reviews that have taken place over the years, there have been no changes recommended nor made to what I would call the crux of the agreement, and that is the revenue and cost sharing arrangements that the provinces have at their disposal, and also certain authorities that are laid out. I believe that the outstanding amendments to the agreement have been described by legal counsel as housekeeping wording changes. Having said that, they still need to be ratified and put into place. And lastly, I can tell you that I meet regularly with shareholders, and I'm not aware of any unaddressed or unresolved shareholder concerns on the agreements.
Okay, thank you for that. It is noted in their report that there's an estimated target for completion for actual ratification, as you indicated, March 31st, 2022. And so I know the dates, when this was prepared and then when this was presented would have been last year. So my understanding is that the target date was not met for that. Do you have a sense of the timeline for when ratification might happen?
As I said, this is really more of an issue amongst the shareholders as it is for us as an operator. It really is a shareholder decision to make. Policy decisions and legislative decisions, and certainly the agreement among the shareholders is something that the shareholders themselves are focused on, and it honestly is beyond the mandate that we have as the operator. So what we focus on is providing a safe and regulated gaming environment according to the permission space that's been defined through legislation and regulations, and so that really is outside of my mandate to answer.
Okay, and so I just thought you might have a sense of the timeline, but I hear that you're saying you're not able to answer that. So I guess we may run into similar issues with other questions, but I'm going to ask them. So I guess I'm wondering then, are you able to shed some light on, recommendation 2.12, that there's not an intention to implement around the governance structures, around board members, around rotation of the chair? Are you able to speak to those then?
The composition of the board of directors truly is a shareholder matter. I have a mandate that's given to me by our board of directors, and that's my reporting relationship. And that mandate does consider shareholder priorities, absolutely, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to offer my opinion on this matter, as it really truly is outside my role. My observation is that the shareholders believe it is in their best interests to have representation on the board, and I respect that, but I'm not going to speak on their behalf.
Okay, and so can I only assume that recommendation 3.2, shareholder government should complete the ongoing review of the Council of Atlantic Premier's pension plan and implement required changes. That I'll get a similar answer?
No, in fact, I
Okay.
can tell you, the pension plan is something that we have a great deal of accountability over. It is one of the most important employee benefits that we provide to our employees, and we are very active on the pension committee. So what I can tell you about the pension recommendations and, the status of our pension plan is that right now, the plan is fully funded on a solvency and on a going concern basis.
Okay, so it was recommended that there be an ongoing review and implementation of required changes, and so that has happened, that is happening on an ongoing basis. The recommendation has now been adopted, you would say?
Yeah, so there was a review over the plan governance and the construct of the plan that was conducted by shareholders. That review did conclude, and a series of amendments were put in place and communicated to employees. And I'm just going to turn it over to my colleague, Suzanne, and she'll give you some more detail.
At the time from the recommendation, the two committees were merged into one. It was about, I'll say, the fall of 2021. The recommendations were put in place and notice were given to all employees of the pension plan. 1 year notice period had to be given the nature of the changes of the reform. The notice would have been given January 1, 2022 and became in full effect January 1, 2023.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. In terms of the items that you're not able to answer, where would a committee such as ours, where would be the best place for us to direct our questions in order to get answers? Who would you recommend we ask?
So the shareholder of Atlantic Lottery is the New Brunswick Lottery and Gaming Corporation, so that would be, I think, the most appropriate audience to answer shareholder-related issues.
And so extending an invitation to ask questions there. Okay. I want to move on to asking some questions about what's in your annual reports. It seems that you are tracking known players, and that the known players have increased significantly in the annual reports we're looking at. So it looks like you had a target of known players of around 294,000 in 2020, 2021, and actual known players were about 308,000. And then for 2022, 2023, 2021, 2022, the actual was 340,000. The target had been 390,000. Those are significant jumps. Would you be able to explain to us what do you mean by known players? And could you also provide the numbers for, I don't know if you'd have them here, 2019, 2020, in terms of the actual and the target?
Would you be able to repeat those years again that you were requesting?
So I had just been reading out the 2020, 2021, and 2021, 2022. I'm wondering if you can provide the 2019, 2020, so the previous year, pre-pandemic year, just about. And then I just wanted to know what, could you define known players?
While my colleague is searching for the historical trend, I'm very glad that you raised this question with us, because known play is one of the most important elements of our strategy moving forward. There's a very, very tight connection between the concept of known play and our aspiration for healthy play. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit more detail. So the majority of our business historically has been conducted on a relatively anonymous basis with our players. So as you think of how we go to market with our products, it's through a whole network of retailers and site holders, and they truly are the face to the consumer of our organization representing us. We spend a great deal of time training those individuals and making sure that they understand our products and that they have social responsibility standards, etc. So what we do have an aspiration is to get more of our players in what we call a known state. And what that really means is that they're registered with us to play. And when they're registered with us to play, what that means is we can understand their play behaviors, and we can provide a fulsome set of responsible gaming tools. Now we have a relationship directly with the customer and the player. And so that really is kind of the definition of known play. I am going to turn it over to my colleague, and I'm sure she'd like to talk to you a little bit about the relationship between known play and healthy play, and how that.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. We're really proud of our healthy play strategy at Atlantic Lottery, and it is founded on that known player state where we can have a stronger relationship with our player. So we recently received our World Lottery Association Level 4 recertification. That's a global standard, and they assess all the different ways that our players play with us. And certainly on a known player status, which is playing through alc.ca, there are a number of tools that we have available for our players to use. Some are mandatory and some are optional. So just to let folks know, we have third-party age and residency verification. Very important for us that our products stay out of the hands of those under 19. It's very rigorous when people are playing with us on alc.ca. Our players have the ability to set daily wager and session time limits. And we have great tools, and we want our players to use them. So as we look forward this next year, we'll be running a variety of campaigns to increase the usage of these tools. Players that choose to take a bit of a pause on play, there's a 24-hour break option for players. And we also have voluntary self-exclusion options. So if people are no longer enjoying our products, which our mandate, certainly our aspiration as a healthy play strategy is for people to be using our products for only fun and entertainment, they can exclude playing with us online for 6, 12, 24, or 36 months. And what that means is a player cannot make any purchases, their balance is refunded, etc. And we have a process in place when people choose to continue, if they choose to continue playing with us, we have a process before they get reinstated. Additionally, we're really proud of a feature that we have available on alc.ca for our players, which is a player activity tool. And what that does is it gives our players a calculation of their play activity and some tips to keep their play for fun and entertainment. So to Patrick's point, known players who are, have a relationship with us on alc.ca have access to best-in-class tools to keep their play responsible.
Thank you, Ms. Mitten. And now we'll recognize Mr. Lagasse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, MLA Mitten. You whipped through most of my questions, so we're on the same wavelength. It's going to be, but just back to the Auditor General's report and just following up maybe in some of the questions. I guess I'm looking at the mechanics. The Auditors General audited ALC, and some of their recommendations and their concerns had to do with shareholder governments. They must have provided either an opinion through your report or directly to the auditors as to why they would not want to accept some of those recommendations. I guess understanding that we could go directly to the New Brunswick organization for answers. having provided those answers in your report, free of opinions or understanding that you're in a difficult situation, we're just looking for the information. Was it provided as to why they would not accept those recommendations? Is the information available in your report, or the answer to the report?
Yeah, as I said, this is really a shareholder matter, and you know, my understanding is that our shareholders believe that it is in their best interests to have representation on the board, and you know, and I do respect that. And so the matter at hand really is the delineation between what we call independent directors and non-independent directors. And the non-independent directors are directors that are employed in the public service, and they are typically members of each provincial shareholder body. And as I said, you know, I believe that the shareholders have a perspective that having those individuals reside on our board gives them a good sense of oversight into our organization and a good sense of accountability into the organization and communication. But again, I'm reticent to speak on their behalf with fully conclusive comments in that regard, because it's just not my role.
Sure, you just be the messenger. That's just be the information. But in 1.18, the Auditors General really gave an example of what the concerns are, the issues are, and essentially the example that was given is they provided an example which the board with government employee board members unanimously approved bylaw amendments related to changes in the director appointment process. Then those same 4 board members, acting in their capacity as shareholder representatives, did not accept the changes they had just approved. So I guess that's why there's a concern there of how the decision-making process is happening. I'm just wondering, has ALC in that situation, in lieu of the changes not being made, is there any safeguards that you've taken in your governance to minimize those situations?
So what I can tell you is that the governance model that we have, it's a very complex business to begin with, to be owned by four crowns. But the governance model that we have, you know, has proven to be effective from my perspective as the CEO. I can only offer my perspective and the organization's perspective. And what I can tell you is that our board is a very effective board. They have excellent governance practices. You know, they hold regular meetings, they have subcommittees that are engaged in the business, and they have many what are to be considered governance best practices. I'm not a governance expert, so I can't really opine on that, but I'm led to believe that a lot of our board practices are best practices, no question about that. So with regards to you know, the composition of the board, who is and isn't on the board, you know, truly is a shareholder matter. What Atlantic Lottery does and the board of directors is we provide a skills-based matrix. We typically want to ensure that our board has a fulsome complement of the requisite professional skills that are necessary to provide fiduciary responsibility to an organization like ours. And also that we have, you know, a good diverse board as well to bring perspective into the table. And we do that. We take that opportunity to communicate with shareholders. But each province does have a different process in appointing board members, and we respect that.
Yeah, and I'm less concerned about the board composition. It's more around procedures, and I'm wondering, like, even in that case, typically, if there was going to be any kind of conflict, you'd see board members recuse themselves from the vote. Is there regular discussions or safeguards, I guess, to say if there's any kind of potential conflict in the decision-making that the members are required to act in a certain manner? Has that changed based on what the Auditors General brought up?
So we do have a conflict of interest policy. We do have a governance policy. It is reviewed on a regular basis, and revisions are made to that using outside legal counsel and on all of the oversight that you would expect for a policy like that. I'm not aware of any conflict declarations that have been made in regard to any governance discussions, any bylaw discussions, or any of those examples that you had referenced.
Okay, thank you. One more clause on the Auditors General that, more of a question mark for myself. And I don't know if this is still the case, but the board chair has been chair for 14 years, 21 years on the board, which is kind of irregular for not having terms in the situation. And my understanding is that the ALC board decided not to accept any changes or modify that. Is that still the case? And was there any reason given to why they wouldn't adhere to regular practices on this aspect?
So the board chair has a contract between the board of directors and the independent chair. So the board itself would evaluate the performance, they would administer the contract. And, as I said, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to opine. My understanding is that this is the last contract with the current board chair and that succession planning is underway. And with regard to term limits, we do have three-year terms in place, but we don't have term limits in place right now. And that's a practice, as I said. We do have a governance committee, and they do every year review policies and protocols, and that's something that is for review always. Yeah.
Okay, so but they didn't provide a specific answer as to why they would keep it as is. Okay, thank you. Back to your community sponsorship program, which I've seen before, and it is a very nice program. It's also, having dealt in that business for many years in my own profession, it's very complicated. There's a lot of emotions and people watching. I'm just looking at the mechanics of it. 200,000 in New Brunswick. Is that a budgetary amount, and are they set for all the provinces? I know the revenue sharing is based on a percentage, but for this program, is it based on an overall budget and spread out evenly based on same percentages, or is it on a need basis on request? Just a little bit on that.
So the process that we would use to set the budgets would be sort of a combination of, as you would expect, as most budgets, historical trending, where we think there are opportunities in the future. We work with each province as well to understand what activities are taking place, if there are regional events, and so Prince Edward Island is a wonderful example of that. So as it became known that the province of Prince Edward Island were going to host this wonderful event, we got involved with the province to talk about what kind of a role could Atlantic Lottery play in an event like that, and we're proud to say that we're sponsoring the volunteer aspect of the Canada Games, which is just a wonderful give-back opportunity for the organization. And so the budgets, though, by province, they would vary year to year, depending, of course, on the events that are taking place. So that's, it's a combination of a trending amount and kind of a desire to be within a parameter, but also we would take opportunities to go outside of those, depending on what kind of events are taking place in the provinces.
Yeah, and I understand Canada Games or ECMAs, where it moves around across provinces, you almost have to have a separate budget because you get a large event like Canada Games in New Brunswick, and if you only stuck to the 200,000, you pretty much suck up all the money for all the other events that wouldn't have access. Now, I'm kind of curious, the example given by my colleague for Cavendish, does that fall into their base amount of, let's say, the 200,000 that New Brunswick has, whatever their amount is, or is that considered one of those marquee events that are kind of overarching for Atlantic Canada, and they're excluded for their general key events and I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but
So marquee events like Cavendish Beach is in addition to the small community events that we sponsor. So it's not part of what we would say is a typical budget, a typical sort of a year. That would, even though we've been involved for a long time, it is still considered more of a marquee event that isn't necessarily only a Prince Edward Island event.
Okay. And is there any of those typical, same type marquee event in New Brunswick?
Yeah, my colleague tells me that the Harvest Music Festival would be one that does attract, you know, people from all over, and it is more of a regional festival than it is a local one.
And I just wanted to add that it's open all year round for people to apply, to be assessed for sponsorship funding, and we do have some criteria associated with that. So we do want to ensure we spread our sponsorship spend across the region and hit every corner of Atlantic Canada, so there's a positive impact. Sponsorships are evaluated on a number of criteria, including number of attendees, reach across the province, activation and branding opportunities, on-site visibility, partnership business model, and really an opportunity for us to engage with Atlantic Canadians. In addition, I think we're looking at a lot of different cultural events. We really want to be representative of the communities where we're working and living, so lots of great opportunities for sure.
Full disclosure, when I was president of Hospitality Days, I went through that process. It is a very extensive application. I will agree with you. It's very well done. You seem to mention that it's mostly festival-based, activity-based. Is that for all provinces where it's mostly festivals, or do you expand a little bit more into other types of sponsorships, whether it's fixed organizations or, and is there differences in the models from one province to another?
So as much as I was talking about how complex it is to have 4 different sets of regulations and legislation from a gaming perspective, from the administration of our branding and community proud and how we show up in our communities, it is consistent throughout all provinces. The application form and our desire to be engaging in communities, in cultural events and in local sort of grassroots festivals, it is consistent throughout Atlantic Canada.
Okay. But it's festivals. I've noticed in the revenue provided to New Brunswick, they put $1 million in the sports trust fund and then 1.2 into arts and culture. So does that essentially exclude ALC from going into that sector because there's the member is taking care of it, or do you really focus on? Has ALC decided festivals is what we're really going to focus on, and you're not sponsoring hockey teams and?
No, that's exactly right. We do, as you can appreciate, and it sounds like you have a background in this field. This could potentially be a bottomless, cup for us to try to fill, and so we do try to focus it on where we think we can make impact to local communities, and as my colleague said, to just get a relationship with Atlantic Canadians where they reside and be part of their communities.
Okay, and quickly, there is a very significant difference between sponsorship and donations. Does ALC have a donations budget also for those types of organizations?
We do have a differentiation, and we do, as a socially responsible corporate citizen, we do make donations, and I will use the United Way as an example. The United Way is our corporate charity of choice, and we're proud to participate in their payroll deduction program.
Turner, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome you here this morning. Good to have you with us. Thank you for being here. Back to what we were talking about earlier, I guess, on vending machines, I just, a little bit further on that, just so I understand a bit more. The idea to keep growing that opportunity, I guess, and would it just be in traditional locations, or would you be looking at new locations? You mentioned I think Loblaws, for instance. Well, I gather you are in Loblaws at the customer service desk probably, but the idea, would this open up the potential for new vendors that do not currently perhaps vend your products? Is that something in the future perhaps? Or?
It's seldom that I want to say no to any new opportunity, and I certainly won't say no to that. It's absolutely under evaluation. Right now, we are limiting our distribution of these machines to where lottery is already sold, and typically these are high-volume retailers. One of the reasons these machines will have benefit is to avoid the intimidating process of buying lottery sometimes, because you can envision a customer going up to the retail counter and seeing 30 scratch tickets, and they may not understand the games. And so we want our players to understand our games. In fact, how we define healthy play, what healthy play is to us is that our player understands the games that they're playing. They set budgets and they stick within them, and they set time limits and they stick within them. And so right now, our immediate plan is to only include these in locations where lottery is available, but that may absolutely change in the future.
And I will confess that where we shop today in traditional places that we're used to going to, you're seeing more self-serve checkout. So that's more or less what this is, an opportunity for the consumer. And I know we see it in grocery stores, drugstores, even dollar stores now. You just help yourself and check out, and I can see where you're going with this, and obviously there's a lot of thought behind it, but it's a way down the road for sure. And we were talking about the mobile vending truck when we last were chatting, I guess. So I'm taking that's a fairly new concept, more recent.
Yeah, that was something that was an opportunity for us to show up in a different way at these community festivals and events, and just to get the attention and to differentiate and to tell our story about healthy play and responsible gaming. And so this is something that I think was developed in around the time that the COVID health restrictions were at their height. And so we really only had an opportunity to roll this kiosk out over the last year. So it's in its infancy.
So that explains why we haven't seen it perhaps in our neighborhood, but look forward coming soon to a festival near you. You just answered really what I was going to ask. If there are 20 fairs and festivals that you support in New Brunswick, this truck could make an appearance at any one of those if the schedule would permit it. But obviously you got festivals in all 4 provinces going on, all jammed up in 3 months, and probably so. I gather you want to try to get the truck in all the provinces, or is there more than one truck? I don't know.
There is only one truck, but we do get it in all of the provinces. We do try to make sure that it is present at as many festivals as we can logistically accommodate.
In your opening remarks, you mentioned how many employees that you have approximately. I think I heard the number 22 or 2,400. Does that make sense?
So that's a number that includes not only our direct employment, but also our indirect and our induced. And so there is an economic multiplier in that. So that would include, if you can envision the employees of Atlantic Lottery, it would include the employees of all of the retailers that sell our products, and then the spin-off from that. In terms of the direct number of employees that we have in New Brunswick, the number is 324. And that is out of a total Atlantic Lottery employee base of 443. So approximately 75% of our employees are located here in New Brunswick.
And I have to get this question. How many of those would be located in Moncton, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly the vast majority are located in Moncton. We do have some employees that are working remotely from different locations in New Brunswick, which we accommodate as a progressive employer. And we also have field employees that are looking after those important relationships with retailers and site holders throughout the province.
As the MLA from Moncton South, I have to first of all applaud you and thank you for being the great community partner that you are in our region. But I have to ask you, from the bottom of my heart, how many of your 324 employees, or how many of those would work in downtown Moncton, are they back to work? Are they actually working in downtown Moncton? That's a huge problem for our city right now, and I think probably most cities across Canada. How are you looking at this time? Can you share that with us?
So when the health restrictions came into full effect, and it was incumbent upon all of us to work from home, We were very proud to make that pivot at Atlantic Lottery. In fact, in March of 2020, when that time came, we were able to pivot the organization very quickly and work 100% remotely, and doing so in a way that delivered projects and continued to provide the necessary customer experiences that our customers, had expected. And so evolving from that, we are seeing a tremendous shift in the workplace. Every business is going through this, and what they're calling a war for talent. And so employees have an awful lot of opportunity to work for different companies outside of the region and stay here in the region. And so the strategy that we took on this was to provide choices for our employees at the outset. And we've given employees 3 choices. The first choice is to work mostly in the office, which is what I have tended to do and continue to. We've given them the choice to work mostly remotely, and then a hybrid of the two. And the reason we've done this is because we know this is what employees are looking for, and we know that to be a progressive employer, we have to be able to be flexible in this regard. Now, having said that, I absolutely share your concern on the economic, impact that this is having, and I can share some numbers with you. The breakdown between those 3 cohorts is approximately 30% of our employees are working mostly remotely, and the remainder are choosing to come in either every day or a couple of days a week. And so on any given day in our building, you could see as much as 70 to 80% of our employee complement in the building is full. I can only share this as an opinion, but I do believe that employees are starting to come back into the office environment more and more. We are social animals as human beings. We do require, personal interaction, and there are many, many aspects of business that is best conducted in person and not on a screen. So we are continually, by the way, evaluating that program of hybrid work and remote work. It's something that we're continually looking at.
Thank you for that response, and thank you for that initiative. As the MLA for a downtown area of Moncton, it is critical, I think, that as many employees get back to work as they can. And if you're saying that most days you're in that 70% range, I think that's wonderful news for 2023. Not all of our downtown corporations are at that level at this time, and obviously as government, we're encouraging them. As provincial government, I know the municipal government as well are very conscious of the vitality of the downtown core of all of our major cities. So that is appreciated. Thank you, and keep that initiative going. Work downtown and support downtown. You're sort of in a unique situation. You represent 4 different provinces, 4 different territory or geographical areas with 4 different population bases. How does your revenues get divided up at the end of the year? I gather there's a formula there. Can you share that with the committee?
So this would be probably the most important part of the unanimous shareholders agreement in terms of how revenues and costs are shared. Essentially, the way it works is, if you can imagine a decision tree that begins with the question, is the transaction directly for the benefit of a province? And so, for example, if it's a sale that takes place in that province, well, then that province is credited with that sale. And so that's how revenue, gets allocated. And then when it comes to the cost structure of the organization, if the cost is directly associated with that revenue or that province, then it gets charged off there. And so when you think about head office employees, for example, that are working on behalf of all provinces, their salaries and their expenses would be split and shared amongst all. And the way that's shared is a combination of a percentage of revenue, depending on if it's a particular line of business or if it's categorized as overhead, and that would be shared at 30% for all of the provinces except for Prince Edward Island. They take a 10% share of that. And that was part of a negotiation and part of the ongoing shareholder agreement review that takes place regularly.
it's complicated, but it seems like it's fair. A lot of logistics for you to obviously track all of that, but at the end of the day, wherever the largest volume of revenue comes from, that's the same percentage that goes back into those different areas, I guess. We've talked about a number of things this morning that are sort of unique, and that obviously the competition in the marketplace is changing, and you're reacting to that. We've talked about how you're finding new ways to vend your products to the consumer. I'm just wondering what the future is. Where do you see the future going? I mean, it's great to see what we're doing in 2023, but where do you see 24, 25, 26? You must have a broad view of where your we'll call it your industry for sure. It's an industry. Where do we see that going in the future?
Thank you for that question, and I'm going to try not to talk too long about this, but our industry has gone through a tremendous amount of change. So there was a time when the games that were played in Atlantic Canada were decided by Atlantic Lottery. We made the decision on which games and when they would be released to our player base. That time is long gone now. Our players are deciding what games they want to play and where they want to play them. And not only are they deciding, they're voting with their dollars and with their accounts. And so a couple of things that we've seen in the industry, a tremendous amount of competition. So we are no longer a monopoly. We no longer have the benefit of being the only game in town. Players have choices. And so we need to respond to those player choices and consumer behaviors. And there's no question that we touched on a number of them today. We touched on the traffic in convenience. We touched on self-service. You think about the digital channel in every single fast-moving consumer goods business. The explosion of digital is something that is at the forefront of our strategy and our future. There's no question about it. But as I said, having said that, there is a physical component to our business that is foundational, and it still represents 80% of our business. And I don't ever see a time for that going away. And so for the future for us, what we need to be able to do is evolve our bricks and mortar business, I will call it, our retail channel. We need to continue to invest in technology. We need to continue to work with that channel where consumers want to go. But we also need to make sure that we have a fulsome digital competitive offering because that's where the majority of disruption is taking place in our industry, in that digital channel.
I appreciate that response. It really is evolving and changing, and obviously you have to be on top of your game to see where it's going for sure. That really completes my questions for this morning, and I really thank you all for being here. And it's been a very eye-opener in some ways, and other ways I think you've solidified some of the things that we were thinking and wondering, and you've put it into words. So anyway, thank you all for being here, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mitten, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pick up where we left off talking about known players. And I know you were looking up some numbers for me on the known players prior to the years in question. I'd also like to add the question, do you have an estimate of what percentage of total players known players represents?
Thank you for your patience. We were just doing a little bit of math. And so the number of known players that we have inside our ecosystem, which is, again, registered play, is in the vicinity of 350,000. And we look at the addressable market in Atlantic Canada of adult Atlantic Canadians being 1.9 million. And so we're in that vicinity of 1/6 of our players are in a known state. So we do have fairly aspirational targets with regards to this, because as I said, the most responsible environment that we can provide for players is the one where we have a direct and known relationship with them. And so we have long-term aspirations and plans and strategies to get to, the target is 50% of the market to be in a known state, and that's a long-term target that we've set. My colleague does have an answer on the history of our known players and registered players.
Okay, and if I could just follow up on that before we move on. So to clarify, the 1.9 million, that's adults. Are you considering all adults to be the market, or a certain percentage of adults? Because not everyone gambles. It's, I guess it depends on the statistics that you look at, but it wouldn't be 100%. So I'm wondering, what are you considering to be the market share? And then do you have a sense of, I guess, sort of what your market share is if you know of about 350,000 players? Do you must be able to guess at how many other players are out there that may be using your products, even just by looking at the financials. So if you could just elaborate on that.
Yeah, so the 1.9 million, we can consider that the player universe, if you will. So these are the adults that even, and residents of Atlantic Canada, that even qualify to play. What our research tells us is approximately 70% of Atlantic Canadians have played lottery at one time in the last year, okay? And so we can say that of the 1.9 million, really 70% of that is an addressable market that's realistic. And so those are some numbers for you to work within. Now the number of 350,000, so those are individuals that have registered inside our environment, and so they've gone through a registration process to play with us. We've verified their age of majority, and we've verified that they're residents here, and we're giving them all of the responsible gaming tools. But those are individuals that have played once in the last year, so they're not necessarily regular active players. We don't look at it that way. We just look at individuals that we have a relationship with, that we can monitor their play and help them if they do have problematic behaviors.
Okay, and so do you know how much any given known player has spent and won? So you would be able to know how much of your revenue is coming from the known players?
Yeah, so like I said, the biggest differentiator between the majority of our business, so 80% of our business is not known to us, but about 20% is. And so yes, when play is inside of our digital environment, inside our ecosystem, we do have data, we have player data that we can use.
Okay, so the 350,000, you're estimating that's about 20% of your business?
I'm sorry, the 20% is actually the revenue component. So what we really don't have, I mean, we have research, that's why we know, or we believe 70% of Atlantic Canadians play our products. But because the majority of that is anonymous play, all we see is a transaction from a terminal at a retailer. We don't know whether or not that same player went to 5 retailers with different transactions of our products, so we don't have that level of granularity for the majority of the business, and that's exactly why we really have aspirations to get more of our play in a known state.
Okay. Why don't I let your colleague answer with the trends, and then I'll ask some more questions. Okay. Thank you.
So for our total known play numbers in fiscal 18 were 72,000. In fiscal 19 was 92,000. Fiscal 20 was roughly 181,000. Fiscal 21, 315,000. Fiscal 22, 344.
Okay, thank you for that. And so, can you I guess this doesn't, this represents how many people you're able to track. It doesn't necessarily represent an increase in the number of players, or would you say that it does correlate with an increase in the number of players?
It would represent how we can track. So for example, if you bought a lottery ticket at your convenience store, you could also be online buying a lottery ticket, and those would be separate transactions, so yes.
Okay. And so from the players that you can track, do you have the numbers on like how much they are spending on gambling? I'm wondering, yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so we do. We have all of that data at our disposal. Yes.
Okay. Are you able to then share with us some of the information around that? Like, what is the average, or what are some of the highs? I'm wondering if you can let us know what you're finding from that data.
So I have some data to share with you as it relates to the iCasino product that we recently launched in 2020 in New Brunswick. So on a weekly basis, on average, we're seeing players play $80 a week. So that's a number that we're using, and we've got, in the vicinity of 6,000 active players every week, even though we have in the vicinity of 25,000 registered for that product. So that gives you sort of a sense. I don't have a lot of product specific online digital channel averages to share with you today, though, at my disposal.
Okay. Is that something that you would be able to provide to the committee?
Yes, absolutely. That's information that we have readily available.
Okay,
Would
thank
be more
you.
than happy and transparent to provide. Yes.
Great. So if you could provide that, it'd be good to see averages. It would also be good to see the outliers, because averages can be helpful, but they also don't tell the whole story. Because I'm wondering, so $80 a week, that means there's people who are spending a lot less and people who are spending a lot more. So thank you for that. I'm wondering if you're measuring, because you keep bringing up healthy play. There's the social responsibility aspect of this, what's happening with people who are at risk of problem gambling or experiencing that. And so are you measuring that? Do you have statistics on what that looks like for the known players in terms of problem gambling, and how are you measuring that?
I do have some statistics to share, and I'll speak and kind of set this up, and I'll allow my colleague to talk about some of the other ways that we're measuring responsible gaming and healthy play, because there are a fulsome number of measures that we're using. So I've been in the industry for a very long time, and the numbers that I'm going to share with you have been consistent over at least 2 decades. The numbers just seem to be right around the same. And so it is in the vicinity of just under 1% of the population experience harm from gambling. and approximately 2% are at what's considered moderate risk or higher, and so that would include that under 1%. So these are numbers that are based on the Canadian Problem Gambling Severity Index. This is work that Statistics Canada does, and so these numbers are from 2018. That is the most recent number set that is available. And the reason that I share these numbers is not to minimize the amount of New Brunswickers who experience harm, but rather to draw attention to it. And, you know, we understand and share the concerns about the harms of gambling. I love to say, as Atlantic Canadians and as New Brunswickers, we live here. We sell our products to our neighbors, our friends, and our families, and we simply wouldn't do that if we couldn't do it in a responsible manner. And you know, I'm so glad to have the conversation go into known players, because the more we can get our players into a known state, the more we can help educate them and bring them awareness about their play behaviors and give them, because we do have data and we do have tools that we can provide to them, and a whole series of measures that I'll allow my colleague to talk to you a little bit more about how we're tracking our effectiveness in healthy play and in responsible gambling.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you for the question. So to continue on, the relationship that we have with our known player base allows us to send out information and messages to players as they set themselves up well for their own personalized play experience. And for us, healthy play means that our players know how the games work. They're aware of the tools that we have available and make use of them. We want our players to use the tools and set the limits that are available to them. And as I mentioned before, we have a really fantastic activity tracker to let our players know if we're observing they're maybe in a higher risk status, and then what we would do is provide them with information of actions that they can take.
Okay.
Through that tool, we do measure the health of our overall player base, and it's consistently within 98 to 99% of the overall player base, based on the various lines of business that we sell products on alc.ca. That does vary, but what's most important to us really is to create awareness for our players, to give them that opportunity to take a pause to reflect, and to have a very simple way to take action. And we've been working with a lot of industry experts, and we have a fantastic tool that we're looking to enhance in the next quarter and go forward. So it is something that's really important to us as an organization, and exciting to be part of it. It's kind of emerging things to review.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm wondering, are you measuring the effectiveness of these tools?
We're certainly measuring the uptake of these tools, and it is a goal for us this year. So as I mentioned, we have the tools and we want players to be using them. Currently, I think we're about 10%, which if you look across Canada, that is a good number, but we're looking to be much stronger in that space.
Okay, I'll pick up when we come back to me. Thank you.
Good call. Thank you very much. Monsieur Lagacé, first over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I don't have any further questions. I just want to take a moment to thank Mr. Dagg for his answer and his staff for his candid answers, and maybe reiterate if we could get the report on the organizations that you supported. And candidly, I think most of us are less interested in auditing that report than maybe being inspired for our own localities. Sometimes we get ideas that some of our organizations don't qualify, but you see something in New Glasgow that resembles your region and you say, oh, maybe you should apply. So I think that's the most interesting part of that report, that if we can get it as soon as possible, we appreciate it. But thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Leblanc, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also Mr. Daigle and your staff. I want to thank you for being here this morning. I have some questions in the lines of the profits that you definitely generate are shared back to government through different areas of government either. So I'd like to have to start off, my first line of questioning is, how much money was generated in the last years back to government, and where specifically it was put in, and in the amounts?
So in New Brunswick, I can take you back, I have it at my disposal right now from 2018 on, so I've got about a 5-year trend, which should give you a good sense of those numbers. In 2018, the profit was 129 million. In 2019, it was 130 million. And in 2020, it was 125 million. So I'm just going to pause there and give you some comments about that period. Now, the reason why 2020 was a little bit lower, okay, and that's because our year end is March 31st, and in March of 2020, we had a material disruptive event. COVID came in, and we had to shut down a large number of our operations. And so we saw fairly stable results up until that point, and then we see the dip. And so in 2021, that number went to 119 million. And then in 2022, which is our last fiscal year, that number rose to 139 million. And so what we've seen is that the business historically over the last quite a while was very stable. It was fairly predictable. I talked about that digital disruption that took place, the health restrictions and all of the closures, and in particular in bars and restaurants. And while that had a tremendously negative impact on the hospitality industry, it also had a very difficult impact on our business. And so what I'm pleased to say is in 2022, our business recovered. Our brands are strong, and our players were loyal, and we're very happy to be able to get to the level of return to the province, and even a little bit higher than historically we have been. So those are the numbers, and more than happy to answer any question that you have about about those numbers. But in terms of where that money actually went. So what we would do, it's essentially a dividend that goes into our shareholder. And what they do with that money is essentially put it into general revenues. So we don't have a line of sight into how that money is used. What I would be able to say, though, is just looking at where public funds are distributed, we know that it's used for healthcare, we know that it's used for transportation, we know that it's used for education, and we know that it's used for debt. But specifically, this money is not earmarked for any particular initiative or line item. It is general revenues.
So you're basically, thank you for the answer. So you're basically saying that it's basically up to the government of the day, or the government, to put the money that they see where it goes, where it fit. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I thought it was more like an agreement that each province had with ALC, and there was commitments towards sports, there was commitment towards culture, or other facets of, like you talked about, education, healthcare, and also possibly mental health, game addiction programs.
So I can tell you that each province would make their own determination as to how they want to use the proceeds of our crown. In Nova Scotia, I think what you may be referencing, in Nova Scotia, they do have programs set up to earmark a certain percentage of funding into culture and into sport. And so that's something that they've made a decision as a province to do. No other provinces have done that in Atlantic Canada, and frankly, very few across Canada. It's very uncommon in Canada to earmark the proceeds of gaming.
So do you have numbers on Nova Scotia, how they earmark, how much percentage of their dividends would be going into sporting culture or other?
I can take this question if it's okay, Patrick. In working with Nova Scotia, they make a decision on a flat amount, and they say, for example, $5 million this year of any monies that would come from Atlantic Lottery that would go to Nova Scotia would be placeholder for Source for Culture or Source for Sports. And it's their decision what that amount is. It hovers around $5 million each.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer. So as I move forward, especially you talked, Mr. Daigle, this morning about a lot of new initiatives, and there's a lot of competition, and you're basically, there's an increased competition in the online gaming market, and we all are aware, very aware, to see what's on TV, and a lot of famous former sports athletes are promoting it, and it's growing. I mean, it's a significant, and you're in that competitive market, and you mentioned it this morning, that let's face it, you're a small fish in a big bowl, in a big market, and if I'm correct to say that. So what are you doing to basically adjust and compete to that big market? And I'm just going to give you an example. We have I think you have two casinos that you have direct contracts, or you're in control of, or you would basically manage, if I'm not mistaken. No? Or you have partnerships with? No? So why wouldn't these casinos have a sports booking desk to compete with those big markets, the big, I'm not going to name them because I know I might get in trouble here, but like you see this, and it's kind of like, wow, you guys are basically, we're not in the same level playing field. And it's a concern.
You are absolutely right that it's not a level playing field, and it is a concern. It's a concern, first and foremost, for us, it's a concern on the health, because as I said, these operators, they just don't have the same perspective on the business that we do. Now, with regards to a sports operation inside of a casino, that really is not under our mandate in New Brunswick. There is a separate mandate, and so as I said, the criminal code says that the provinces have to conduct and manage gaming themselves or through an agent. So we would be the agent for New Brunswick as it relates to lotteries and video lotteries and digital gaming. As it relates to casino gaming, the province has chosen a different model, and they're using a private sector operator to run those operations. But you are absolutely right that there are opportunities to put sports betting in place to compete. Now, we have had an online sports product offering. It's branded as Proline, and it's been in the market for a very long time. We have loyal customers, and we're very proud of the brand. But it was only in August of 2021 that the Criminal Code of Canada changed to allow for single event sports betting, and what that means is, before that, a player, in order to make a legal sports wager in Canada, had to combine events into what we call a parlay. And so that was how all of the regulated lotteries were playing, but all of the unregulated and illegal operators that are active in our environment have always had single event sports betting. And so that single event at the federal level to change the criminal code gave us an opportunity to compete and try to get caught up. But make no mistake, these operators have been in this environment for a long time. What differentiates us, though, is we know our players because we live here. We have a great relationship with them. If they ask questions, we answer them. We're transparent. As I said, here we are in front of the committee. These operators will not do what we are doing. So we do have an advantage, and if there's one thing that we're very, very proud of from Atlantic Lottery, is the trust that Atlantic Canadians have in our brand. When they see our logo, they know that integrity and responsibility are at the core of what we do.
Okay, so time is running quick. I'm just going to maybe pivot on the same line, but maybe more on the implication that the bill C-128 had on the sports betting impact for Atlantic Lottery Corporation. What might be the future implications on that bill for you guys?
So this is as I was referring to, this is the bill that moved the requirement to combine sporting events into a single wager, into now just having a wager. For us, it essentially leveled the playing field, as I said, so it was a tremendous opportunity for us to now be able to promote. Now, what I can tell you, though, is that sports betting is a niche product in lottery and in Atlantic Lottery. It represents 2% of the total gross gaming revenue that we generate. Having said that, players they have come to enjoy our brand. They've come to enjoy our experience. We've modernized our website. We're trying to make the play experience very seamless, but also at the same time offering the responsible tools and just information for our players so that they understand their play. Now, moving from a requirement to have a number of games to wager on to a single game has lowered our margin. As you can appreciate, it's a lot harder for a player to win 3 games than it is to win 1 game. And so we're seeing a fairly sizable increase in the wager activity, but in terms of the revenue that's left over after we pay prizes to the players, it really isn't that significant. For us, sports betting becomes something that we have to offer our players because, first of all, they want it, and if we don't offer it to them, they will go to offshore and illegal, gamblers. And so this is an opportunity again to get them into a known state with us and for us to develop a relationship with them. But the industry is absolutely advancing at a rapid pace. You're quite right. The future of this sports betting is starting to proliferate.
Okay. Just one thing, I know you talk about the healthy play, and I was listening, and what I understood, under Stats Canada's numbers, there was only a 1% of people who experienced a harmful from gaming. I kind of find that very low, or there's a big volume on 1%. I don't know if we have data more relating to ALC than just Statistics Canada?
So we don't track statistics at the regional level. As I said, in my tenure in the industry, the numbers just have not moved, and that is not to say that they aren't worthy of tracking and that they shouldn't be tracked. But at the federal level, that's a number that we can rely on, just because Statistics Canada has the requisite
Okay.
levels of integrity. But there are other tracking mechanisms that we're using that is not sort of a broad research, telephone survey, self-reported kind of a thing, and I think it's more impactful for the actions that we take because they're at a granular player level, and I'll let my colleague explain what some of those are.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So there's a number of ways that we do measure the health of our player base, and more importantly, how our players are doing individually and providing them information on their personal play so they can keep within their set game plan. So that information is available through our alc.ca system, and we work with a provider called Necton. They're globally recognized for the work that they do and the information that they can provide to us, and we're learning and growing as we do this. Certainly, our ambition is for all players to enjoy our products for fun and entertainment. And when they're no longer enjoying our products, we have various ways that we connect with community groups to ensure that they get the support that they need. We do measure gambling literacy in the region. So what that would mean is we're measuring different aspects of players' play, and we're really interested in increasing the reach of people understanding how the games work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Wetmore?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll probably be all over the place because I was making some notes, and then maybe after I get those questions answered, I can focus on some specifics. It's one of the businesses I owned. We were lottery retailers for a number of years, so I'm certainly somewhat familiar with the way ALC works, but it certainly has changed over the years. I want to start off by agreeing with my colleague from Bathurst West Beresford. I tried to go online and look up your report, and I wasn't allowed online. Now, whether it's a government site or a government computer or what, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure why we didn't get a written report, but what I'd like to say is that when you're before public accounts, we should have all the information that we can get, and it's doing ALC a disservice by not making sure that the members have all the information to ask. So I'm going to strongly encourage you, I don't care if it's photocopied or what, but you do an annual report, and I think you should make sure that at least Public Accounts Committee members across Atlantic Canada have a copy of your reports for a period of time so that we can ask good, timely questions. And if we have the report, maybe there's questions that we wouldn't be asking. So that's an observation. So I'm going to put that out there. And I'm just going to go down sort of the list I have. Your self-serve location. So personally, I never use a self-service location. When I go to a Walmart and they say, you know, the self-serve checkouts are open, I just say, well, when I go use that, I'm working you out of a job, so I'm just letting you know that. So that's my personal opinion. You say today you've got 27 self-serve machines in New Brunswick, and we're averaging, approximately $1,000 a week per machine, or was it only about $160 a week per machine? Oh,
Sorry. In the initial start of the launch, we're about $125, $200 a week. The goal is to get to $1,000 a week. As part of our launch, we've started some more marketing around it so that the consumer is aware of the services that it can bring to them for those who choose the self-serve route of customer service.
And how long have these machines been in the stores?
I would say 5 to 6 months. It's very, very new
About
in
6
our
months.
launch.
And I haven't seen any in New Brunswick, but I am certainly aware of them. I see quite a few of them in the States. So what's the cost per machine to put in a location?
Just trying to do some mental math. Just one sec. I want to say it's about 10 to 15,000 per machine, including the software to have it connect in with our other integrated products.
Okay. And I think you mentioned that you've got them in the super value, or the super value did approximately $1,000 for the week. I think that's what was told. The super values, do they have their tobacco and their lotto in a separate booth, a separate room? Okay.
We do.
So I take it then that self-serve machine would be in the same room. It's not in the on the floor. Okay. Who's the provider? Is it a New Brunswick provider that did the machine and the software, or is it
It's Scientific Games.
Scientific? And they are out of?
So Scientific Games is one of only a few very large gaming vendors in our industry. Their head office is in Alpharetta, Georgia, but they do have operations in Canada. They have ticket printing plants in Canada, and in fact, they have a fair number of local employees here in New Brunswick as well that represent their business.
Yep. You know, I'm just thinking back to when Spilo was in business, and I'm not sure if they're still in business or not, but, or if they've been sold out, and they were certainly big gamers, I guess I'd call it, in its day. So, no, I was just wondering. So with our self-serve machines, we buy them and that's it, or is there annual contracts for updates and things like that?
So this is a new, while it's not new to the industry, it is new in our retail environment. And, you know, what's interesting about it is, you know, look, I'm not a marketer, but what I can tell you is when you've been in business for 46 years, as we have, selling products largely the same way for those 46 years, and you start to introduce a change, you're asking consumers to change their behaviors. And this is a fast-moving consumer good. And so it's taking our consumers a little bit longer than we thought to adopt to this new practice. And so we are absolutely going to be changing our approach to this. We're going to be educating retailers more, educating the public, you know, trying to sort of get our adoption raised a little bit. But we will absolutely evolve the program.
Okay. When you did your business plan for these particular machines, how long did you think it would take for them to be break even?
So the business case that was developed for these self-service terminals was developed before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, you know, in that scenario, we had envisioned, again, using information that we had from other jurisdictions that were mature in this, we had envisioned a payback period of between 1 to 2 years. And what we're seeing now is it's likely going to take, you know, in the vicinity of 4 to 5 years to pay back the capital on these terminals. But we still don't know that yet. We don't know what kind of a curve that can be created. The life cycle of these assets is in the vicinity of 8 to 9 years, and so it is still a very positive payback for us.
Okay. Now, I did get a text, and I didn't get the location, but I've been told 2 of them are out of service, and they didn't tell me where, so I don't know if it's just because the retailer just hasn't looked at it or doesn't know, and maybe before we're over, if they're listening, they can send me where their location's at so we can sort of have a discussion about it. You know, I can sort of only give my opinion, and I certainly, when we see what's happening in the market below us with 300+ million people, you know, and then we're dealing with a population of, you know, less than 3 million, I guess you're dealing with it. It's really hard to compare and see if you'd be able to, you know, do the returns as quick as they do down in the States. And I know that the machines are getting popular down there, but I don't know. Up here, I think that there's more of a loyalty towards ALC as opposed to down there. And once you move to self-service, you start to lose that loyalty. And I think that's certainly something you should be cognizant about. So one of the things, and what surprised me, was the big amount of offshore betting. You're saying $140 million in Atlantic Canada. I had no idea it would be that high. I think the question, and I don't know if Atlantic Lotto was asked, is why are we losing $140 million in revenue to outside sources? So it's got to be a relatively easy answer, or a question you should be able to get the answer. And so my question is, you know, why haven't you changed your business plan around to be taking more of that $140 million back?
So this is absolutely at the center of our strategy to repatriate players. We have done just that in the early days. We've only been in the business of iCasino since August of 2020. And how we launched that business, not unlike how we're launching our self-service terminals, we're launching it in a very careful manner. Because as I said, our aspirations are not commercial. Our aspirations are not to drive a profit. That's an outcome of our social responsibility perspective on the business. Very different than these private sector operators. And I can tell you that these private sector operators, if you want to, right now, if you want to pick up your cell phone and play, all you need is a credit card and you go. So they don't have the same controls that we have in place, and they're not regulated. And the question is, why aren't they regulated? And it's a fantastic, I absolutely love the question. I think it's probably a question best posed to our federal regulators. And that's something that we're doing with this coalition that we have in place. You know, and that's why we're bringing the issue to light. And so whether that's FinTrack, whether that's, you know, the Department of Justice, you know, the RCMP, absolutely, you know, because this is activity that is, from our perspective, very clear on the criminal code. And so we take it very seriously, and we are trying, as I said, to repatriate players. We believe we're successful. We believe we can be competitive, but we have to be responsible first. So you know, there are some things that our online competitors do and allow that we simply will not allow on our site.
Yeah. So if I go back to the 90s, when there were all kinds of the gray video lotto terminals, the governments of the day, and probably ALC was certainly involved, found ways to move that industry away from a gray industry to a legitimate business. I'm sure that offshore sites would love the opportunity to try and turn their business into a legitimate business. So have you, when I say you, ALC, or the federal government, tried to come up with an approach so that they can do pretty much like they did with the video lotto terminals, and you know, move them from gray into mainstream?
So this is something that we've seen take place in Ontario. That's exactly the position that the Ontario government took. In April of 2022, Ontario introduced an open online gaming model where the private sector operators can register and be approved by the Ontario regulator, and they've got oversight over that conduct and manage. So I had talked earlier about the criminal code and the requirement for a province to conduct and manage. Ontario believes that the market construct that they've set up satisfies the provincial requirement to manage and conduct, and they're overseeing these operators. And so these are products that are being offered online. They are online casino, and they are sports betting products. And the operators are paying a fee of about 20% of their proceeds into the government to be a participant in this market. Right now in Ontario, there are approximately 50 of these operators that are registered, and we've seen, since this market opened up, a proliferation of advertisements. Now, in terms of whether or not that market construct has been contemplated here, you know, frankly, that is a shareholder decision to make. whether that model gets adopted, frankly, is a shareholder issue. It's not an operator issue. It's a policy decision, and that kind of a policy decision is beyond our mandate. So, you know, each province in Atlantic Canada is making informed decisions on how they want to offer gaming, and that's based on several factors to determine, and we would work with them to provide data and research. So when I look at that model that they have in Ontario, my opinion on it is that right now, as I said, and we're very proud that we give back 100% of the profits that we make to Atlantic Canada and into New Brunswick. And so from my perspective, it wouldn't be wise for the province to trade 100% dollars with 20% dollars, and especially given our emphasis on healthy play. That is my opinion. And so this Ontario market, the entire industry is watching this, and we're looking at the results. We're looking to see whether, you know, it will be successful. You know, what's interesting about Ontario is they still have an illegal operator market in Ontario. And so what they've determined is that you're not able to eradicate it, because unlike the video lottery operation of the 1990s, and I absolutely love your analogy because I use it all the time about how this digital business is exploding. It's much more difficult to control these virtual gaming operators because they're operating offshore in countries that may be outside of our legislative jurisdictions. That does create one of the challenges to govern and enforce it. But that doesn't mean that we're going to not try.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Daigle. We've had you sitting there for probably 2 hours now, so I think it would probably be in everybody's best interest if we take a short break to allow you to stretch your legs, and so we will take a 10-minute recess. Order. So I believe we are going to, Ms. Mitten, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pick up where we left off, discussing issues around problem gambling and around the social responsibility aspect of ALC. I believe I was asking how you measure effectiveness. So if you could elaborate more on what you're measuring and how effective the healthy play strategy is.
Thank you again for the interest and allowing me to continue on the question from before. I was talking about our positive play scale that we have in market twice a year. And there's it really measures 4 different components of positive play across the region. And those are honesty and control, pre-commitment, personal responsibility, and then the gambling literacy. So we work with an industry expert to facilitate this, and we're seeing some really good and consistent results. I mentioned before that gambling literacy is a bit lower in our region, so it is important for us that we increase that. And what gambling literacy would mean for our players is players understand that gambling is not a good way to make money, that they would understand that the odds of winning don't increase the more that they play, etc. So we have had some awareness campaigns in market this last quarter. We call it our Smart Fun campaign, wanting our players to be smart with their fun. In addition, we have terrific information available on our website to help people understand how the games work, including games that aren't necessarily played on alc.ca. So I give an example of our video lottery business, even though that's played with in our retailer sites. If a player wants to learn more about those games, they would go to a new page that we just launched on alc.ca, specifically related to video lottery. So while we have some terrific programs in place already, we're always continuing to look at ways to improve and provide additional information for our players. And just to reiterate, we want our players to be enjoying our products for fun and entertainment and responsibly. So how we can do that, there's a variety of ways working with industry experts.
Okay, thank you. At the end of the last round, you mentioned 10%. Can you remind me what the 10% was? Was that the level of gambling literacy, or can you explain what the 10% was?
The usage of tools, so that was,
Okay.
so we have tools available on alc.ca. Some are mandatory and some are optional, so it was the usage of the optional tools. And again, we have these tools and we want our players to use them, so we're looking to increase that number.
Okay, so 10% of users are using these tools, the optional tools. Do you have a target for how many, what percentage you think should be using these tools?
We'd eventually like all players to be using the tools. We do have a target for next fiscal year, so we're looking to double that amount and work towards that.
Okay. And so in terms of effectiveness, are you able to track whether these tools curb problematic behaviors, or whether, like, are you able to track effectiveness of the tools? I see there's there's 10% uptake in some of these, and so that's one measurement, but are the tools effective?
So one of the ways we measure effectiveness, and again, it's a journey, so in a continuous improvement mindset, a lot of these different aspects of responsible and healthy play are emerging. And we work with different operators across Canada and also internationally to help understand what will be effective with players. And I'd mentioned earlier that we're really proud of the fact that we have a tracking tool that allows our players to understand what level of risk rating that they're playing at with us on alc.ca. We're shortly launching a next version of that, and what it will allow us to do is provide players with prompts when we're observing particular aspects of their play. And it could be, for example, a prompt would be, we've noticed lately that you've been playing more with us. Would you like to set a session time limit? We've noticed lately that you've been spending more with us. Would you like to set a spend limit? And through those type of prompts, we will be able to measure the effectiveness. So while we're not there yet, it's definitely on our path and journey to get there.
I would just also like to talk, I love the questioning on how do you know if you're being effective. And one of the indicators that we have, while it's not a data set and it's not research based, you know, it is about some of the accreditations that we've been able to receive. So in December of 2021, so a little bit more than a year ago, we received the Responsible Gambling Check accreditation. So it's RG Check accreditation from the Responsible Gambling Council. And they would be considered a global leader for over 35 years in the prevention of problem gambling, and this would be essentially the highest level of recognition that's available. So that's one accreditation. And in addition to that, we recently were recertified, and the reason is important is in the WLA, the World Lottery Association, they have a responsible gaming certification process. And we've achieved the highest level, which is level 4, but we've been recertified. And what recertification means is that every few years they come in and do an audit of us, and they now expect us to continue to improve. And so it's not the kind of thing where you can stand on your laurels. You have to continually improve and do better and get better. And whether that's tools you provide your players, information you're providing, your social responsibility assessment processes, there's a whole myriad of, and it's such an extensive process. And so we're quite proud to say that we've recently been recertified.
Okay, thank you for that. Just from the numbers we've been discussing, I think this is a really important piece of the puzzle to ensure that there's effective tools and safeguards in place. You mentioned maybe 1 or 2% of like the statistics show 1 or 2% might be problem or moderate risk gamblers. And so let's say you have about 350,000 known players, and we know it's more than that, then we're talking about, let's say 3,500, 7,000 people, and that's just a part of the puzzle. And then we know that the average, you said the average spent per week is $80. That's more than $4,000 a year, and that's a significant amount, and so that's the average. And so I guess there's concern about what that means for some people, and 1% can sound like oh, it's just 1%. It doesn't always translate into the number of thousands of Atlantic Canadians, thousands of New Brunswickers who may be really running into trouble with what you're selling. And so I guess I would, I would urge you to look at the effectiveness, the measures of that, and I'm wondering, are there any additional safeguards that are in place? It sounds like the main thing is if someone's online, then prompts might come up. Is there anything else, or is there anything, I know that, people are adults, they can make decisions, and if that there are limits to what you can do, but you're also providing these products.
Thank you so much for the question, and I think it's an important one. Certainly, while we're very proud of the tools that we have in place for all of the products that we offer, we're always looking at ways and what's to the future and what more we can do. It would be important to point out the self-exclusion tool that is available for, again, our ALC.ca players. So if players decide that play is they're no longer having fun with our products, they can exclude, and that's a contract that they have with us, and we hold people true to that. So that's really important. In addition, we have tools available on our video lottery products. We train all of our retailers who are selling our products. They're recertified in training. And as we look towards the future, there are roadmaps to say how can we increase that relationship with our players and ensure that we can have good conversations so they can stay within their game plan. We also work really closely with community members. If people are experiencing harm from our products, that they have connects to the right folks to get support.
Okay. So how many players use the exclusion option? It looks like about 35,000 would be using these optional tools, if that's 10% of the about 350,000 known players. But I'm wondering, so how many are you actually using these tools, and how many have used the exclusion tool?
I don't have the exclusion number for ALC.ca offhand, but I certainly can find that number out.
Okay. If you could provide that as well as the amount of usage of the other tools to the committee, then that would be appreciated, so we can get a sense of which tools are being used and how much. And so if you have it, I don't know exactly what you're tracking. Ideally, we could see how many people have used it, maybe how many times, how often it's used. I don't know. Whatever data you can provide would be really appreciated, so we can get a clear picture of that. And I heard, I guess it's interesting because obviously there's an effort to be socially responsible with a product that can be addictive, and so that's tricky. What I'm hearing from you too is that you're trying to target certain people or increase your market share. Can you talk about who you're targeting and how you're doing that? I already heard one group you're trying to attract 19 to 35-year-olds. Can you talk about who else you're targeting or marketing to as you hope to expand your market share?
And so we divide our customers into segments, absolutely. And as you can imagine, there are many, many ways to do that. And so to to put a fine point on it, essentially our goal in the online space, is to repatriate players who are playing, in the offshore and illegal environments. And so that's a very large cohort that is going to involve, different demographics, different generations, different play behaviors, and, we're not necessarily differentiating, among those. What I can tell you, though, is that, again, at the foremost of how we're looking at growing our business, we're looking at doing it in a responsible way. And so there are players, absolutely, that are playing with offshore sites that probably wouldn't meet our standards of, of integrity and responsibility to play with ours. And we have fairly rigorous registration processes to determine that up front, and so they may not enter our ecosystem. I know there was a comment about the 19 to 34-year-olds. That's a group that is they're of age. They really don't fully understand the lottery business, and they're digital natives. They've grown up, in the digital channel. And so it's important for us to maintain a relationship and be relevant with them, because if we're not, the only alternative they're going to have is on sites that aren't necessarily safe. They may not have the certifications we have. They may not have the same, safeguards in place, and that's not something that we want to see happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daigle. Monsieur Leblanc?
C'est bien. I just want to take time to thank you, Mr. Daigle, and all your team for being here. I have no more questions. I don't believe we have any more questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What more?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have probably just a few loose ends to clean up. You tell me the pension now is fully funded? Yeah. And I noticed that they have Mr. Lee White now as head of your pension committee. I'll tell you can't get a better gentleman than Mr. Lee White. He'll do a phenomenal job. I just have a report here that's dated September 23rd, 2022. So certainly, there's some changes, I'm sure, that have happened. But in the quote, it said, he also said ALC's pension committee has initiated an asset and liability modeling test to better determine the best long-term reforms to the pension plan. Implementation of these reforms is slated for early 2023. Now, this is early, but have any of the reforms been started?
I can definitely take that, and I agree that Leonard Lee White is amazing. I get to work with him on a regular basis. The pension notification went out on January 1, 2022, that there would be reform, and with a one-year notice period, those changes did go into effect January 1, 2023.
Is your pension under the shared risk plan now, or is it still defined benefits?
It's shared risk.
Shared risk.
No, it's not,
No,
sorry. Sorry.
I'll just clarify that. Our pension plan, it's a multi-employer and multi-jurisdictional plan, and because of that characteristic, we did look at the shared risk model, and it was determined that we weren't able to port over to the shared risk model as easily because of that component. There were different pension regulations in other jurisdictions. And so what we did is we tried to get as close to possible to the shared risk model as we could. And by that I mean regular valuations, and I mean one of the foundations of the shared risk model is that the risks moving forward on the plan are shared between employee and employer. And so we've made some amendments to the plan to reduce benefits. We're starting to see a reduction in the contributions that are required from the employer. And as you alluded to, there is an asset liability study that's underway. And this is really a hallmark of a shared risk plan to make sure that the pension assets that you are, that you're investing and putting at risk are commensurate with the plan liabilities. And the importance of this study is to highlight that our liability profile moving forward, that can be de-risked with the assets and the funding model that we have. And then the last aspect that's close to shared risk is one of the amendments that we made was to the indexing of the pension benefit, and that indexing in the past, and it's very common in a defined benefit plan, it was a guaranteed indexing, and moving forward, that indexing is no longer guaranteed. It's an ad hoc indexing that is only going to be paid contingent on the plan performance, and so, very happy to see some of those movements towards what we're seeing in other plans.
No, thank you. Pretty much the same. This article also states that in previous years, provincial governments, this one is talking about the government of PEI, when it was overfunded, drew funds out of the pension plan. So did any of the other provinces do the same in the 90s? And have you put something in place that's not able to be done anymore?
In early 2000, all 4 shareholders did receive their respective portion of the roughly 21 million that was drawn from the fund. After that, there was some solvency payments required because we saw markets decline immediately after that withdrawal. Currently, the committee is going through the asset liability modeling study and is exceeding the minimum requirements of the Pension Benefits Act, and we'll be modifying our investment policy to help manage our risk in the upcoming months. But we don't foresee that there would be any major interruptions or impacts to the value of the plan.
Okay, thank you. I just want to ask a couple questions about your board and the makeup of the board. So I see it says non-independent directors and independent directors. So I take it that the non-independent directors are government employees? Okay. And so the independent directors, how are they appointed? Is it like an OIC from each province, or how?
Every province does have a separate process on how they appoint board members to their public boards and their public sector and their crown agents. So every province has somewhat of a unique protocol inside their process. I can tell you what we do with that is we do, and this is led through our governance committee of our board, and I referenced it earlier. So we do provide a skills matrix, and we have a look at the skill set that we have on the board and the skill complement that we think is missing that we would like to see, as a member of the board. And in addition to that, we're looking for a diverse board, and so we would like to see as much diversity on our board as we could possibly get. It just leads to better decision making and allows board members to really apply critical thinking to their fiduciary responsibilities. And so what we do as a company is we report that to the shareholders, what the desires are of the company in that regard. And as I said, they all have unique processes under which they follow to make their appointments.
Thank you. One of the recommendations by the AG is to have not to have any elected members on the board. Are there any elected members from any legislative in New Brunswick?
No, there are not.
Okay. And have you any empty seats at the time being?
No, I'm happy to say that there are no board vacancy seats right now. We have a full board.
Okay. And I take it your board, the terms are of 3 years? And they're rotated through?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they're three-year terms, but what we like to see is staggered terms because it's a continuity aspect, and so for the most part, our shareholders are working with us on that as well.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to ask some questions about compensation. I see that when I read the executive compensation summary, there's short-term incentives earned, Can you maybe quickly explain how you earn incentives and?
So we have in place something called a short-term incentive program, and it's based off of our balanced scorecard. And so our balanced scorecard is essentially a report card that we use to manage the most important key metrics of the business. And the most important word in there is that it is balanced. And so it takes into account responsible gaming initiatives, it takes into account the engagement of our employees, it takes into account the reputation of our company in the region, and it also takes into account our financial performance. And so it is a balanced, it's a balanced set of metrics that are used. And the targets and the weights and the measures for that scorecard are developed with the board of directors. They have a tremendous amount of oversight over that process, and it is that balanced scorecard that determines the short-term incentive that is used. And the reason that's important is, as I said, we are a unique entity being owned by four crowns, which is one aspect of being unique, but even more than that, we are competing commercially with private sector offshore operators. And because of that, we're trying to generate market performance. And if we want to generate market performance, we have to pay competitive market compensation. And in most competitive commercial organizations, there is some form of variable pay component. There is some sort of pay at risk or some sort of a pay for performance mechanism. And we have found historically that to be very beneficial to the company because at the end of the day, when we are successful as a company, it means that Atlantic Canada benefits from that success. We know that all four provinces not only depend on us for revenue, but they expect us to do it in a socially responsible fashion. And so, so those are some of the hallmarks of, of our short-term incentive program.
No.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Would it be available to get the KPIs for that and sent to the clerk so we can just review it? And I also see Table 2 says employees with an earned base salary of $100,000 or more. Are those employees, is it open for them to also get bonuses or?
So the way that we've constructed the short-term incentive program is that every level in the organization is eligible, but the way in which it's calculated changes a little bit. And so for the executive team, our short-term incentive payment literally is the balanced scorecard for the company. But as you move through different levels of the organization, as you can appreciate, the ability of those individuals to influence the outcome of corporate results is not as great, and so there is a heavier weighting on their individual performance. But the incentive program is available to all employees.
Okay. So just to make sure that I've got this correct, any employee at ALC from top to bottom is able to get in on that program or a program.
That's right. They're eligible. They're eligible to participate in the program, but again, the level of participation, it does depend on their own performance and the performance of the organization. So. Yep.
No, certainly. If you could send that off to look, that would be great. No, I think I'm pretty much done. Look, I appreciate you coming, and it was certainly interesting. And I think the market is in electronic gaming. I can tell you, even myself, when my kids give me these Set for Life tickets, and I got to sit there and scratch all day, I say, oh my gosh, give me something quicker. So. I really think that your future is trying to find a way that you can get that offshore money that's going out, and like I say, kids nowadays, everything's on this, and that's the future, and not old guys like me trying to scratch. So, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you very much, member, and you're still here, so obviously you haven't won Set for Life yet. Ms. Mitten, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I would like to ask a few more questions related to your profit goals and targets around the money you're bringing in. I know, in your annual report, talking about record-breaking profits, significant increases on certain products. Could you talk about what your goals are? And I guess, in terms of the goals, have you been achieving your goals up to now, and what your goals going forward are?
So over the past, I want to sort of take you back over the past couple of years to give you a sense of how we've been performing against our budget. And one of the benefits of being in the market for so long, when the market was stable, so I'm talking about, over my career in the 1990s and the 2000s, our ability to predict business results were very, very close. In fact, our tolerance level on our budgets were 2%. And don't forget, this is $1 billion that's made up of $1 transactions at a time, with a whole series of products and channels of distribution and different markets in different provinces. So the business has been very predictable historically. That changed with COVID, to be honest with you, and that was the first year that we did have a variance. So in the year of, our fiscal year of 2020, we did not hit our profit target. We were trending to. In fact, we had, I like to say, in 2020, we had 50 good weeks. We had 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of our fiscal year, where our video lottery network was essentially shut down. The property we have in Charlottetown, our Red Shores property, was shut down. And that was a time that I'll just remind you that many of our lottery retailers were shut down, and if you weren't an essential service, and so it impacted our business in that 2020 year, and Suzanne will share the numbers with you. And then in 2021, we set a budget, and that was, in my tenure in the organization, the most difficult budget we've ever had to set, because we just didn't know what the impacts of COVID was going to be on our business. We just didn't know when the health restrictions were going to end. And so with our best estimates and with all of the knowledge that we had, we set a target out there, and in New Brunswick we came very close to it, but we were just shy of it. And on a percentage basis, we were probably within that 2%. And then in 2022, the most recent year, we again, still a lot of what we call blackouts and brownouts on availability of our products, but things were starting to materialize, and I'm very proud to say that we overachieved our budget in 2022. So things are starting to recover and materialize, and Suzanne will share the numbers with you just to give you a sense.
Thank you.
So the fiscal 20 year, there was only 2 weeks, so I'm going to focus on 2021. In 2021, for New Brunswick, we had expected a budget of 137 million, and we fell short by just about 19 million to deliver profits to New Brunswick of 118.5. That was the year that we saw the most lockdowns, where we had complete closures of our retail and destination locations throughout the year. And then for fiscal '22, because of course we prepare our budget well in advance at the start of that year, we had a budget for New Brunswick of $141.5 million, and we fell short by $2.2 million to land at $139.3 million delivered to the province of New Brunswick.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering, so do you have specific growth targets? And if so, can you elaborate what those look like?
So when we do long-term forecasts, of course, and we do them under a number of different scenarios. We do them under our status quo. We do them under an optimistic scenario that may include new games that aren't in our permission space yet, that may be evolving, and we do so under a pessimistic scenario that may include these illegal offshore operators taking even a bigger share of our business and us being unsuccessful with all of the activities that I talked about. In New Brunswick, our expectation is that the business is going to settle into the vicinity of between $145 and $150 million. That's sort of our expectation. As I said, though, we still haven't fully recovered on our destination channel in our bars and restaurants. That still hasn't come back to where it was. But we are seeing growth in the digital channel. And the reason why that's so important to us, again, is because those players are known to us and we can give them the tools, and it's important to us because that is the future of the business. And so we are seeing growth in the digital channel. We're very excited about that. But again, we think that the business is going to stabilize in the coming years. We don't see tremendous growth.
Okay, thank you. And so, following up on what you were just talking about in terms of known players, this healthy play, these tools, can you talk about what gambling addictions resources are available and how they get communicated to players?
Thank you for the question. I want to start by mentioning that any product or service that Atlantic Lottery puts in the market goes through a rigorous social responsibility assessment process, and we believe that differentiates us in terms of comparable to the illegal operators. In terms of how our players would understand what supports are available to them, certainly, we publish support lines in materials that are at destination sites with our retailers. There's a huge section on alc.ca to provide the different supports. If a player calls our center, our contact center, those folks are trained to identify if there's signs of someone that's in distress and can direct those players to support, including a relationship we have with the Chimo helpline that's based here in Fredericton. That helpline actually supports all of our players, even outside of New Brunswick, with the relationship that we have. We also work with or have partnerships with the various treatment providers in the region, and we offer access to training for specific kind of progress around treatment for gambling concerns. Even as recently as this week, we had our Community Partnership Day, where we had treatment providers from around the region join us on a webinar and get access to someone from Canadian Addictions and Mental Health to understand what are some assessment tools that are available, recognizing signs and pathways for support. So very proud of that program. It's certainly, we are not treatment providers, and we do know we play a role being part of this community to provide access to support.
Okay, thank you. When you say treatment providers, do you mean like primary care providers, or can you just clarify?
Yes, departments of mental health, social work, that.
Okay. And how much uptake is there on those supports that you're talking about in terms of making calls or accessing those things that you would be aware of since you have those relationships?
Just to clarify the question, how much uptake from treatment providers to our kind of education sessions or from players?
I'll ask both.
Both.
Like, yeah, how much uptake for treatment providers? Like, how many people would you be training? But I'm wondering how many players are making calls or trying to access help.
So in a similar situation that we've all found ourselves in, our community partnership days, when things started to shut down with COVID, we ended up moving those to an online platform. So it's been a really great opportunity to, I think, provide additional reach on the training. There was about 100 providers on the last session that we had. We get great feedback on those. We provide a connection, so there's a credit, education credits afforded for participation in those sessions. In terms of the calls that we get to our contact center, we do monitor those calls. Certainly, in the last 2 years, the number of calls that we've forwarded to CHIMO were 10, 2 from New Brunswick.
Okay.
And again, CHIMO is the crisis line that we have a relationship with. It's run by the John Howard Society, I believe. Yeah.
And so there's likely calls going directly to them that you would not have awareness of? People
Yes.
calling directly to CHIMO that you wouldn't know about them, but people could be calling for this reason because
Yes,
the
I can
number's out
imagine,
there. Yeah, okay. I'm curious if you are familiar with or have looked into something it's called a prize-linked savings account or no-lose lottery. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or have investigated if this type of setup could be part of what ALC offers.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. Prize-linked savings accounts, also sometimes referred to as no-lose lottery. And if you're not familiar with it, I'm happy to explain it a bit.
I'd be really interested. I haven't heard of it.
Sure. So this is basically people can make a deposit into a savings account, and if they make that deposit, then they are entered into a lottery, basically. And so they have the possibility of winning a prize. It can be a cash prize. I have seen other things offered, but can win a cash prize. But if in the end they don't win, they've made a deposit into a savings account that they keep. And so there's different variations of it. I think it could be done with a public bank, and so interest on that could go back into, government general revenue or however that would go. But basically, so it's no-lose lottery, so even if you don't win, you haven't lost. So anyway, I wanted to know if you've heard of this. It exists in other countries, and it's becoming more and more popular in the U.S. Actually, 30-some states, I believe, have adopted legislation to allow this, and federally, they've allowed it 8 years ago, I believe. So I wanted to ask what you thought about this, if you think it could be part of what ALC does, or, I mean, right now, it would, I don't know if you'd see it as a problem, or I guess I'll let you respond.
Well, as I said, we're always looking for innovative ideas, and we will never rest on our laurels, especially when it comes to social responsibility and providing products that our players want and can access through other means. And so it is of absolutely, it's of interest to us, and we've looked at concepts similar to this in the past, and so I'm encouraged to hear that other countries have put this in place, and it is something that we'll look at in the future as well. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Absolutely. I would, encourage you to look at it and consider what it could look like. I understand that the profits may be less for ALC, but the consequences for the players would be, a better outcome in terms of savings. And if ALC doesn't do it, there are already others in that space who would take that market share in Canada. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. So yes, I think that could be an interesting way to approach it. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with if you examine it further. So if I guess I'll just keep going. I don't know if you have any more comments on that. If not, I'm going to change topics. I have a few more questions. Okay. I wanted to ask about lottery retailers. So in the interest of time, I'll explain a bit why I'm asking these questions. I want to understand a bit about the application process for a retailer to have, I understand there's different products that they could have in their retail location, but I'm wondering what that process looks like. And again, in the interest of time, I'll get right to it. How does ALC ensure that it's equitable? Because some people believe, and so we can look at the data and decide if they're right or wrong, but that there's a bit of a bias where people, for example, a store in a more rural area or a smaller store would not have the same opportunity. And so I wanted to ask about this, if you could address that, please.
So we have a process, of course, not just completely dissimilar from our sponsorship application process. And so there is an objective way of looking at how we place lottery terminals, and it does need to be objective. And of course, we do provide professional judgment on it. And so what goes into consideration, first and foremost, is a background check. We need to make sure that the partners that we're doing business with have the requisite standards of integrity and responsibility that align with ours. And so that's a financial background check. It's a criminal background check. Okay. So then we go into what's called a site assessment, and the site assessment is for business standards that we've laid out. And what that's going to look at is, is there sufficient in-store traffic, right, to warrant this? Because it is a capital outlay of our organization. We don't impart that onto the retailer, so we put the terminal in their location at our expense. So we want to make sure that we can get a return on that capital, just to be responsible stewards of funds. And so there is a minimum sales amount that we look for, but we do look to location in relation to other retailers, and we do look at the map of New Brunswick. We need to make sure that our products have access geographically within a reasonable, drive. We look at the type of retail business that they are and whether that type of retail business aligns. And we also look at their willingness to merchandise and to be trained and to be socially responsible. So that again comes into it as well. So these are all factors that play into where our terminals get placed.
Okay, thank you. How many applications would you receive per year for potential retailers?
I'm sorry to say that I don't have that information available, but we'll absolutely provide it to the committee. When we go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
My follow-up questions, which I think would need to be included in an answer you send in, so I'm wondering about how many applications are submitted, and then how many are approved, and if you can break it down in terms of urban versus rural in the province. I mean, one thing, I was speaking with a retailer who would like to have ALC in their location, and one of the things is that there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation where having these products would actually increase traffic. And I'm wondering, is it equitable because naturally there'd be less traffic in certain places, or and even just some places are more seasonal, and that's very true of a lot of New Brunswick. And so I'm wondering if the process is fair and equitable in terms of who has access to this. Yeah. So I'll look forward to you sending these answers to the clerk so that the committee can have them, and I will just take this opportunity to thank you all for being here today. Merci beaucoup. I appreciate you answering our questions, and that's all from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Daigle, thank you for being here with your staff. If I had one thing to say about Atlantic Lotto, I would say that maybe you need to train your ticket sellers a little bit better, because every time I go and buy a ticket, I ask them to give me a winning ticket. They smile and nod and say, sure, but I haven't won yet. So maybe you could give them a little more training in that area. I'd like to thank the members of the committee. The level of questions over the past 2 weeks has been outstanding. And so I'd like to thank the members for that and for their sense of cooperation and collaboration that's been very evident these past 2 weeks. At this moment, Mr. Daigle, I would pass it over to you for any closing comments you care to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would just like to thank you all for taking an interest in our business. We take it very seriously, as you can tell, and I'm sure you can tell as well that the team is very passionate and very proud of what we do, and we're always happy to be transparent and accountable about the important work that we do. So once again, thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, this brings our week to a close. So thank you, everyone. We now stand adjourned.